So this continues on from last month. We were talking about shame. That was a good one. Wasn't that a good one? Man, that was awesome. I was really touched by that one. And going on guilt. And just focusing on just what guilt was. And remember we talked about shame and guilt, and that guilt is action-based, like what you do, and shame was more identity-based, where guilt says that what you did was wrong, but shame was like, because of what you did was wrong, then you're wrong itself, right? And we know that's not true. Like, we're not defined by what we do, right? Yeah. So even we all make mistakes, mess up and do wrong things, bad things, but that doesn't define who we really are. And so people make mistakes and we move on, we make things right and we move on. So I'm tired of this. I'm kind of using like a Hawaiian culture to teach different classes, and this one is called pono. And pono in Hawaiian means to do what is right. But to do what is right on the outside, you gotta think what is right on the inside. Because your actions are gonna follow your thoughts. And so we're gonna focus on, doing what is right, but we're gonna focus on, you gotta think the right way on the inside. So we're gonna focus on thinking the right way when it comes to guilt. Because guilt can really mess you up. And have you ever struggled with some type of guilt? Like in some way or another? That's kind of, me too. And so we'll be looking at that and just kind of seeing how that applies to our life, and especially in pono, like thinking what is right so we can actually do what is right. Because if you're feeling like guilt, you feel down, you feel depressed, it's going to be like really pulling you down, and it may lead to the point of suicide as well. People have like this for years been tormented with guilt. But if it's really built upon a false way of looking at things, a false way of looking at guilt. And so I'm going to look at the first thing. There's actually a good guilt, and then there's a bad guilt. Okay? So we have to look at both of them. So we look at the good guilt first as well. So not all guilt is bad, as we're going to find out. And this is how we're going to figure out what is good and bad. So the reason why we feel good guilt is because we've done something wrong. And if the only reason you have guilt is because you've done something wrong. And it's actually a good thing, the good part of guilt. In fact, good guilt is actually showing you that you hurt someone, or you maybe hurt yourself. And think about the psychopath. If you don't have any guilt, that's really people who are considered psychopaths, because they have no guilt or remorse for anything they've done wrong. For example, you ever seen in America, where I'm from, they have a lot of like shootings with guns, like mass shootings. Like this year has been just crazy, like a lot of shootings. And you ever seen the interview of these mass killers where after they murdered 10, 15 people, they interview them and they have absolutely no remorse or no guilt at all, no conscience for what they've done. You ever seen that before? The psychopath killers? So actually guilt was there as a good way to give us a conscience, to give us feeling to like not do something harmful to someone and like, I don't care, but actually to care so that you won't do it again. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's a good part of guilt that we're talking about. That's what we're looking at. So to do something wrong and not feel guilty for it is really an unhealthy place to be. So having a good guilt is actually a good thing that won't hurt other people. So what is good guilt based upon? So this good guilt is based upon something called the golden rule. How many of you have heard of that before? The golden rule. So the golden rule is that you do to others as you would have them what? Do to you. Okay, so kind of break it down. What does that mean? Example, would you want someone to murder you? No, right? So really, you don't want no one to kill you, then you want to do to others what you would have them do to you. So you don't want them to kill you. So really, the golden rule is that you don't want to go and kill people. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's good. Do you want people to go to your house and rob your house, steal your car? How many of you guys want that? Steal your car? No, right? So because you don't want that to happen, you do unto others that they do to you. So you don't want to steal their car. So does that make sense? So that's what the golden rule is like. It's based upon unselfishness rather than selfishness. So you don't want that to happen as well. Or you don't want someone to lie to you. So I want like your spouse or your partner or your girlfriend to lie to you. And that's like the worst thing. That was the worst thing that happened to me. It was worse than even like her cheating on me was actually her lying to me. Does that make sense to you? Like those lies is painful. And so to actually to be in that place of a lie. So you don't want to, because you don't want to be hurt by a lie, you don't want to give that same hurt to someone else who's lying to you. So that's what good guilt is based upon. So in your handout, there are 5 different types of guilt. Now, which of these guilts is based upon the golden rule for a healthy guilt? So remember, there's good guilt and there's bad guilt, right? So I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to break into a group of maybe 3 people, actually 2 people, and then find somebody and just kind of hang out and ask them like these questions, like look at the different 5 types of guilt. Number 1 is this guilt for something you did. 2, there's a guilt that you didn't do enough to help someone. You're helping someone who is very ill, but now you don't have any more time for them. 3 is a guilt for something you didn't do but wanted to do, like you wanted to cheat but you didn't do it, but you just had a guilt because you were thinking about it. 4 is a guilt for something you think you did, like you wish bad upon someone and some evil twist of fate happened and a person died or something. And then the 5th one is they call survivor's guilt. That most people go to war, all their fellow soldiers, they died in combat and you survived. It's called survivor's guilt. So just kind of look at that and kind of just see the different type of guilt. Like which guilt of these is actually a healthy guilt that was actually based 100% upon the golden rule. Okay? Break up groups of 2. And we'll get back in like a few minutes. So, yeah, I think number 1 definitely, and the rest, and we can go really deeper into a lot of these issues, but just a lot to think about. Just to bring it out. But a lot of times I think we bring a lot of guilt upon ourselves and it can really wear us down. So let's go back to the guilt. So this guilt comes to us, right? And it's here to kind of show that, okay, what we're doing is wrong. And we have a choice now. We can either reject this guilt that's speaking to us, or we can actually accept it. And the moment you accept this guilt, then you're like, okay, what is this guilt is saying that I did was wrong, I am wrong. And you have a deep sorrow that you're very sorry for what you've done, a sorrow that you're actually not going to go back upon your sorrow, but you actually really want to change. That's the difference. You can be sorry and crying and everything, but don't make a change in your life. That don't mean anything, right? But like a sorrow that you're really sorry for what you've done and you really desire to change. You may fail in the future, but at least your heart is saying that I want to try and change. Does that make sense? So the moment you make that desire to want to change, then the purpose of that guilt is done. It leaves. And the problem is, and we're going to talk about the next part about the bad guilt. So that's the purpose of guilt. So think about this, and I'm going to ask you the question. Have you ever felt a good guilt, this good guilt come to you for something you have done wrong? And what was it? Okay, so now breaking the groups of 2s and 3s. Okay, cool. Okay, let's go on. We'll talk about the bad guilt. Okay, what's the difference? So we have this false guilt, and where does it come from? So what happens is, say, like the good guilt comes, and you feel like, oh man, what I did was wrong. Okay, yes, this good guilt is right. It's telling me what I did was wrong. Okay, I accept it. Then I feel sorry for it with a sorrow that's not gonna be, you're not gonna, be sorry again and again and again in the future, but it's really I want to change. So you have this guilt work in your life, and you're really sorry. And then when that comes, then the good guilt purpose work is done, and so it should be moved to the side. The bad thing is that when you're sorry and you really, I'm so sorry, you make a change in your life, and you do make a change and you didn't do it ever again, but then that guilt, the good guilt, somehow comes back and it says, you remember you did that? Like, oh man, so stupid. Have that happened to you before? When it comes back again, when you're truly sorrowed and that you're not going to do something that you're going to have to repent again, when that comes back again, then you know that then that's a false guilt. That's a bad guilt. Because the purpose of the good guilt is done. You did not only were truly sorry, but you changed. You went in a totally different direction. They say repented. You changed totally from what you've done. But when it comes back in and torments you, man, after many times something will like trigger me. I'm like, so stupid. Have you ever happened to you before? That's so dumb. And it keeps coming back and like, okay, forget about it. But the fact that it's still tormenting you, and some people it's worse than saying stupid. They get into depression, they get suicidal because the guilt is so heavy. Not even one guilt, but many guilts. Just continue on in the mind, and there's a battle in the mind. Everyone thinks everything's good on the outside, but the inside is like, oh man.
You ever felt that way? So that's the bad guilt. So that's the transition from the good guilt to the bad guilt. And so what happens is that you have to choose. When the good guilt comes, you're going to be battling between, okay, and the good guilt comes and you actually make a decision and change. Then the bad guilt comes after you made that change in your life. It's going to come in the future that you're going to be tormented, and you have to choose, okay, is this bad guilt? Is this true or not? Based upon what I know now, right? You may be living with bad guilt your whole life and tormenting you, and it's been a big burden on you. But now you know, okay, this bad guilt is based upon a lie. That's not true anymore. So you got to come to a choice. Like, am I going to continue to believe this lie, or I'm going to believe the truth of how guilt really works? And so you have two pathways, and now it's a choice. You can choose, and if you choose, okay, this is a lie, then you're no longer going to be tormented by that guilt anymore. The hard thing is that you're so used to and conditioned to this lie, it's going to be hard to break free from this lie. That's the hard thing. Kind of like in Hawaii, there's a lot of hunting. I mean, you guys ever been hunting for, they hunt wild pigs in Hawaii a lot. Okay.
He's not lying, we're just YouTube people.
Look. Turn the camera.
I'll say what I see every Saturday.
So imagine you're walking down this big pathway and you're hunting or whatever, and you walk down like a few kilometers, and then up this big pathway that's wide is this big cliff. And at the end of the cliff, you always seem to stumble and you fall over the cliff, you get hurt, the ambulance comes and takes you away. And you're like, okay, the next Friday night, you're walking down, you go to another cliff, you trip over, you fall over the cliff again, okay? After a while, like, man, it's so dumb. And then somebody says to you, hey, did you know that there's another pathway that you're not gonna get hurt? You go, oh, really? So yeah, okay. So you look for the pathway, but one thing is like really small. So you forget about it, you fall over again. The next time you say, I'm gonna look for this pathway. So you look for the pathway and you find this small little pathway. It's actually a pig trail. And then this pig trail is like very skinny, branches over there. You walk through this trail, the branches are cutting you, you're bleeding, it's all wet, get pig poo all over you stepping into it, it's smelly, but you don't want to follow the cliff again, so you go through this pathway. The pathway is hard to go through. But the next time you go through it, you notice that you didn't fall over the cliff. The next time you go through again, you walk through the same pathway, it's smaller, but it gets bigger, a little bigger. And then next time you go, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you notice that the big pathway they used to go to, because no one's walking on it, it starts to close. And that pathway that once was large has disappeared. And that new pathway you walk on gets bigger and easier to walk on. That's how the mind works. They call it like newer pathways. Like you're so used to a bad habit of doing something, like believing this lie of bad guilt that's tormenting you. And then this new pathway comes in your mind, no, I'm gonna believe a different way. And it's gonna be hard to walk in this new way, but you keep on believing, nope, that guilt I'm feeling, even though I'm not doing anything anymore, I was really sorry for what I did. This guilt that keeps coming back to my mind, that's a lie. I'm not gonna believe that lie anymore, I'm gonna believe the truth of how guilt really works. And you continue to do that, and after a while, that pathway becomes normal to you. So, does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. So there's like a new way of walking on a pathway. When you're going hunting, I'm going to create a new trail. And just getting used to thinking a certain way over and over and over. So, false guilt. What false guilt is going to say to you? A false guilt will tell you that you're still guilty even after you accepted the good guilt and were truly sorry for what you've done. A false guilt will tell you that your wrong was too big to be forgiven. You ever felt that way before? Man, what I did was so bad, there's no way I can be forgiven. How many people have told me that? A false guilt will tell you that you were too bad to be forgiven. You're such a bad person. There's no way you can be forgiven what you've done. A false guilt would tell you that you weren't sincere enough in being sorry. Because you know why you're guilty? Because you weren't really sincere when you were sorry. A false guilt would tell you that you have to pay for your mistake by staying guilty for the rest of your life. Kind of like, what you did was so bad. How bad you feel guilty is the way you pay for what you did. Does that make sense? I mean, this is like tormenting. I've done that. Like, I do something wrong, and like, man, I almost like have to torture myself for like 2-3 days after, like just to make myself feel like I paid for it, and then I feel, okay, I feel better about myself. Ever felt that way before? Kind of like this heavy. And it's when we hold on to these guilts that, so the very good guilt, right, that was meant to be good for us, to save us, to actually treat other people in a better way, becomes the very means of which destroys our life and becomes a bad guilt. Do you guys see that? So the very thing that meant for our good was the very thing in the end ends up destroying us. And that's what destroys a lot of people today. So I want you to think about this next question. Is there false guilt that is or has tormented you? And what is it? So do you guys see the difference between a good guilt and a false guilt, though? Do you kind of see how the purpose of the guilt? There's a young man who's inside of our program who's extreme depression. In our program, our Healing Rain program, we were running a 10 days program. He was just drinking every night, sneaking out, drinking, coming back, just drunk. And finally got to talk to him, and he said it was actually the guilt that was just tormenting him. And because he was from a religious background, I framed it in a way and called the good guilt is like the Holy Spirit speaking to you, God speaking to you. And the bad guilt is like the devil want to accuse you, and you have a choice who you want to believe, the truth or a lie. And so he said, I asked him, do you want to believe the truth about how it really works? So you want to continue to believe this lie about this bad guilt. And he chose, I want to believe the real guilt, the true guilt. So a few days later, I asked him, how's it going? He said, it's been very hard, but I've been choosing not to believe the lie that this false guilt has been tormenting me with, and I've been choosing the good guilt. So you kind of see, like in a practical way, how it can really change your life if you really think of it like, I really need to believe the truth of how guilt works, because if you don't understand it, it can just totally destroy you and destroy your life. Okay, so I know we have just a little time left, so okay, go ahead.
This is a question. Do you think the environment that you're in will help you be on a good guilt or the bad guilt? Like, they help you, the environment that...
I think so, yeah. Actually, that's the next section. Yeah.
Home or who you associate with and stuff?
Yeah, because I think I think other voices come into play as well. So you have your own inner voice we're talking about only, but now there's outside voices. So is it true that here's a question. Is it true that whatever anyone tells you in an authority figure, that everything they say is always right? Is that always going to be true? Could it be possible that, say, like, and I deeply respect, like, say, our parents, because in the Hawaiian culture, we deeply respect our kupuna, like our elderly. But could it be possible that maybe mom or dad, what they told us what was right and wrong, like the golden rule, whatever, and was actually, could it be that what they told us was actually wrong? Could that be possible? So if they told us something that could be wrong, but we're living our life as if what they told us was the truth, like outside influences, then we could actually be having a false guilt based upon a lie that was told us on the outside and feeling guilty about that, when in reality it was actually not a true guilt. It was based upon a lie from the beginning. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah. So outward influences, we're talking parents, could it happen actually from a teacher? Could a teacher tell you something that's not true, but you believe it to be truth and you feel guilty for doing something that was never wrong in the first place? Okay, let me go a little bit closer. What about a pastor? Oh, yeah. Right? Could it be possible? Could a pastor, priest, rabbi tell you something, or religion tell you something that is not true, but you believe that what they told you to be true, and you live your life to it, and whenever you did it, you felt guilty, but later on you found in life, wait a minute, that was actually not true, that was actually a lie. And I'm feeling guilty for things that was not even wrong to do in the first place. So is it important maybe to even who you're around with, what voices you're listening to? Does that not only inside, but where are those voices you're even hearing on the inside come from anyway? They're coming from all the voices you heard growing up, maybe going to church, going to school, your workplaces, everywhere. So I think it's very important not to isolate yourselves from everybody. That's not healthy either. People just become toxic when you separate yourself from everyone. But to be aware, I think, of like maybe, trust me, I'm the authority, right? Whatever it is. I'm the doctor, I'm the pastor, whatever. Just because I'm the speaker, yeah, doesn't mean anything. Like you really have to test even everything I say. Don't believe anything I say. You have to test everything I say to whether it's true or not yourself. Don't believe anything because whatever you believe is going to affect you. So not that what everyone says is true. So I think it's important, I think. Don't you think so? Like to be important, whoever's around you. Good question. I think it's like Polynesians are kind of like that, yeah? Like this not to speak up or say anything or come to the front and talk, yeah? This is hard. So that's really good. I think we need to question everything. That's important to ask questions and get yourself thinking. Be aware, self-aware of how you're really thinking and feeling and what are you doing actually. So that's really good. Just want to wrap it up with, I know I went over, but guilt tripping. People use guilt to control people. Like they say things like, I know you can't make it to my party, but if you really were my friend, you would cancel your appointment and come to my party, right? this guilt trip you to manipulate you, control you, to get you to do what they want you to do. I mean, partners do that to each other a lot. You need to come and visit me because I'm your mom and you need to respect me. Like, this is like guilt tripping. Or like, why can't you come to church like your sister does so you don't burn in hell? So it's kind of like, do you get that? Right? It's kind of like the fear. It's using fear. I mean, God is love, but we're using fear to control you. But it's like you're going to burn in hell as a motivation. Fear should never be a motivation for anything. You shouldn't do things because you fear things. You should do it because you want to do it. Out of love, you want to do it. Don't let people manipulate you to guilt tripping to control you. That's like the worst. And don't do that to people as well. And that's part of the guilt tripping that we all do. So they do work, but they don't last. You gotta keep on guilt tripping the person. And then just the last thing I want to share is that sometimes people think they have power to give or withhold forgiveness from you. So like if you feel sorry and you really did change, they feel like, well, I don't have to forgive you. But you have to remember that true peace doesn't come from someone from the outside granting you their forgiveness. True peace comes from your inside, and you're made it right on the inside and know how guilt works. And you had peace knowing that the guilt you received, it did make a change of heart. You were sorry, truly sorry for what you've done, and there has been a change in your life. And that's where your peace comes from. In other words, you can be, you may do something wrong, go to prison. You may be in chains on the outside externally, but still be in peace on the inside in your heart. And that's what really matters. And that's what we have to really think about, is really be self-aware on the inside. And then when we're self-aware, that's when really powerful things can really happen, like in our lives. And to have pono, find out what is pono, what is right, and what is really right, and what is really true in your mind first, of what is true about guilt and what is a lie about guilt, and then believe that truth. I want that. How about you guys? What do you say, huh? Yeah? Okay. Thank you guys. It's been a good night tonight. Enjoyed it.